Hey there, everybody. Welcome. Welcome. This is going to be a lot of fun today. We are delighted that you are here. Um, and today's workshop is going to be, this will be, I think, really, really rich for you. We have a herpetological expert joining us today. Jackson Shedd, I met years ago when you were working for the Nature Conservancy as a preserve manager. And at that time, you were an outstanding uh, biological illustrator with a big interest and a passion in herps. And you did a little book of the herps of a local park out there in the Central Valley. And since then, you have been very, very busy. Um, and have just created for folks here in California. Oh my goodness, this this book is going to be a game changer for herpetology nerds throughout California. Um, the maybe just by for introduction, kind of, could you tell us, Jackson Shedd, could you tell us about a little bit about your path to this point and what you're passionate about?
Oh man. Well, um, I am passionate about all things nature and biodiversity is really like aside from family and friends, uh, and art is closely tied to my interest in nature. Um, but biodiversity is really what lights me up. It biodiversity and the plants and the wildlife and other organisms that you might find in a place is what dictates pretty much all of my vacations. Um, and in the last few years, most of my vacation time, well, I've gotten to play a little bit here and there away from the book project, but for the most part, since we started the book, um, kind of coming right out of COVID, or actually the pandemic was still going on. Um, I I guess the first part of your question, what led me to the book was this is a book that I've always wanted to write, and there's really only been one other um, uh, piece of literature for the broad spectrum from the novice to herpetologist that has been available for California herpetology. But it's the second edition that was published in 2012 sort of came right at the end of that author's life, and so um, there had been to make a long story short, there's definitely been in the last decade a real need for a new up to date uh, current reference for the amphibians and reptiles of California, and so Robert Hansen and I have known each other for about probably 20 years. Um, and together we sort of had the qualifications and the know-how and the I guess the endurance to put
It
something
definitely
like
takes
that together. And so I had right before COVID hit, I'd actually quit my job, having some health issues, and I just decided that life is too short. This is not what I want to be doing. And I dove right into what I do want to be doing, which is kind of combining science, biology, and art. And here we are 3 years later, and it'll be it'll be available in January for the masses. So we're about
that's us.
3 weeks out from the official publication date. Some folks have already received their copies, so
Yeah. And so, there Mary Oliver has that wonderful poem where she starts, "One day you finally knew what you had to do and began." Right? So 3 years ago, like this is this book that has been sitting inside of you, like this really needs to be done. This really needs to be done. And you're thinking like you're waiting for somebody else to make the book. It's like you're thinking like, conceptually, this is hanging fruit. Somebody's got to do it. But the thing is that somebody has got to do it. And you decided to do that, and the result is spectacular. Let's just before we kind of get into some herp drawing tricks, let's just do kind of a quick page flip and show people how unique this thing is. And I was thinking that maybe when we could do this so people could still see you. I'll open it up on my doc cam here, and you just and you tell me sort of kind of how to flip, and then I'll have this so people can see you and this at the same time, or or you could flip it. Either way.
Sure, and yeah, I'm not sure what I was seeing. My imagery might be reversed, so maybe you're.
Oh, no, no, no. Yours that for some
Oh,
reason Zoom does that.
oh, okay. Well,
It's
yeah, I'll have my copy here in case I think of something, but I'm okay with however you want to do it. Um, Beautiful cover. I have to I've got to say that Princeton field guides are making, in my opinion, the best field guides that are available right now. They have birds covered in a variety of ways for a variety of countries, and they've really delved into a lot of invertebrates, pollinators. They've got some great. They just published a great field guide on all the velvet ants of North America.
Oh,
Um,
that's geeking out hard. That's cool.
yeah, they've got dragonflies, but herps have sort of been kind of a void. And we came along and pitched this idea for a California focused. California, as a lot of us know, is just so species rich in all sorts of groups of organisms. Um, but herps are, I mean, Jack is flipping through the slender salamanders right now. There's over 20 species of just slender salamanders in California. It's
Right.
definitely the.
And I know that like on the camera, it looks like it's just all dark here, but in the live version here, these are really high resolution pictures where I'm seeing all this little body detail in here and all the little speckles on them.
Yeah, and we really wanted to convey those, proportion differences and, subtle color differences in some of these little Batrachoseps species. When the the vast majority of people who stumble upon these in their gardens, or in their backyard, or on a nature walk or something, are probably in coastal California, where a lot of these slender salamanders look like these little worms, and if you look at them up close, they actually have tiny little legs. But we wanted to make them, we made them a little bit larger than life size so that you can actually uh, start to tease out the proportional differences in hand size and foot size. Some of them it's head size as well, and tail length. And then Bob, Robert Hansen, lead author, Bob has actually described three of these species in the last couple of decades, and he's actually involved with describing at least one or two more right now that we have in the book that are sort of unnamed taxonomically. Um,
It's cool when you kind of blow these up to the same size, you really get a sense of just how tiny your little feet are over here compared with this guy.
right, right.
That's a cool proportion difference.
And then Bob had the great idea in a few more pages to line up all of the heads of all the 20 some odd
Hmm.
species that we have in California. So you can sort of compare eye size and
Big eyes.
yeah, you can see that with the Inyo
Little
Mountain salamander kind of standing out there.
chunky. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when you turn the page, there's a few more of them. And so we had these ideas for several of the groups of amphibians and reptiles covered in the book, that kind of those, wouldn't it be kind of cool to show this ideas that hadn't been done before. And so as you flip through the book, um, you kind of get these glimpses at uh, different ways to identify a thing. Like for some of the lizards, I drew the feet or the head um, of the species that would sit juxtaposed with the photograph. So most of these are all photographs, but some of the taxa I did have to illustrate. So here we've got our gecko feet. Uh,
Oh,
so they
that's
so
fun.
this was fun because we up until we were writing this book, we just had the one native gecko with the leaf toe pad tips, and then we were in close communication with the museum manager and curator at Los Angeles County Museum, Greg Polly, and he let us know that there's yet another introduced gecko in Southern California. So we added that one in. Um,
This is so cool. I love
so
all the so it's so with all the different subspecies and variants, you could have, just to make your book smaller, you could just sort of show one.
right,
But you kind of you took on the whole thing, showing all the variants,
yeah.
all
So
the age groups, all
yeah,
the subspecies
yeah,
throughout the state.
yeah. Because just showing the one or the two has been done before, right? So we
Yeah.
we wanted to show, sometimes you find a little baby lizard, and trying to identify a baby lizard using
Right.
another field guide might not get you there. Showing all the young skinks was definitely necessary because I've talked to multiple people they're out looking for snakes and things, but they don't really pay much attention to skinks. I love skinks. They weren't aware that Gilbert skink actually comes in two different tail flavors. They come in blue and pink. So a lot of people growing up in coastal California, they just get the pink tail. So they can tell a baby skink from a western skink from a Gilbert skink because one is blue and one is pink. But if you're in the Sierra Nevada foothills, um, the tail is blue.
Oh, that is so cool. Yeah, I've written my book on the Sierra Nevada, and just flipping through this when I first got it, um, I realized just how much variation I had missed. Like in my field guide, I was looking at this, I was saying, like, what? You're saying this is a California mountain king snake from the Sierra Nevada? What on earth are you talking about? It's got to look like this. But oh no. The um you know, this is there's just so much nuance here that
Right,
I had totally missed. And kind of getting all of these variants all in one place. Look, these are all for, so here's in the Sierra Nevada. Like I thought that this is how the California mountain king snake looked. Okay, I could go like, okay, I can do that. And it's in my book. But then this variant, I mean, this one's it's trying to be the California king snake. If I had
right.
not ever picked up this book, I mean, just for like check this out, folks. Um, in in my field guide, when I go to the herps, oops, they're over this way. Um, I'll have to use the tabs. Okay, there we go. I used my little tabs. All right. So there is, look at this. All right, here's the king snake, the Sierra Mountain king snake, and here's the common king snake. And what I'm going on is I have one variation of this, but look at how much this character looks like this character. I mean, I didn't even know. So this is also for me, I've been looking through it going like, I had no idea of there's this much biodiversity um, and variations between these things. It's so much fun.
Yeah, and we may be the we may be the first field guide, at least focused on California, that kind of points that out right there with the other ones to show that if you are there are a number of king snake um, driven people just very focused on king snakes. There are a lot of these different snake camps, and they breed them and they sell them at reptile expos and things. There are rosy boa people, there are rat snake people, there are a lot of king snake people, and they all sort of know that. But beyond that collective knowledge, it's not really well known. So
Yeah.
we really wanted to show all those kinds of things in this book to convey that genetic diversity, the species richness that you find in California.
Love the latch like next to the penny here. That's so
Yeah,
much fun. Ah. Um, so this and then you went all in here.
I did. I that consumed me for a few years. I was actually studying uh, tadpole morphology and diversity um, for a number of years before taking on this book project. Just born out of my own frustration being in the field, being on at a field site and thinking you had one baby frog, but it might not be that one, and just not having the right tools in the toolkit to identify them in the field. So
Mhm. Yeah,
we,
this little tadpole section, this is, just embrace your inner geek and go for it. If you're
yeah,
gonna do it, you went all the way with, and this is inspiring to me. This is inspiring to me, both as an illustrator, just to kind of like let's do it, and also as a nerd. Um, that this respects the kid in me standing in a pond with a tadpole in my bucket, wanting to know who it is. And most other resources, you can't get there from here.
right. And you know how it is, Jack. You have a concept in your head, and just to see the thing finished on paper is a whole other thing. But it was really necessary too for, amphibian declines are happening all over, and sometimes if you're at a field site, all you've got to go on is the amphibian larvae.
Hmm.
So that can tell you if you're just looking at a a common thing that is kind of all across the state, or if you've found the endangered species that you're looking for that could let everyone know whether or not we need to bulldoze another slice of California and put in another development.
Yeah, so then becomes a real conservation tool,
That's
because
what we hope.
amateurs, this is going to empower the amateurs to say, like, I actually know what I found here. Let's look at this. As well as people who are professional wildlife managers who want to be able to say definitively what they've got. This is absolute geek gold. And thank you. Thank you so much for this work. Um,
Thank
the
you.
and also what I just want to sort of say to folks out there who are watching, if you have a project inside you that needs to happen at some point in your life, you'll be looking back and you'll be saying to yourself, you know what I really should have done? I really wish I did that. And if you've got something that it's been stewing in your head and brewing and brewing and brewing, that energy from that's going to hold you through the process of making something like this happen. And so you can do this if you do this. And I want to encourage all the nerds out there with some dream project in your heart, in your head, to let your freak flag fly and see what we can do. The world needs more of this kind of energy, Jackson. This is great. This makes me really, really happy. So let's kind of turn towards kind of looking at the connection between your brain, the species, and your pencil. You've put together a handful of tricks for us specifically about drawing lizards. Um, because like we could do something on drawing snakes, but um, then there'd be this thing in front of you with legs, and be like, oh, Jackson didn't tell me anything about this. So I was wondering if you could just for us to kind of get inside your illustrator mind, kind of take us through a few things that you think are really helpful for people who want to sketch lizards that they encounter in the field.
Okay. So I sent you sort of a syllabus outline, and I'm not really sure where to start, but we can.
Start with whatever part you think is going to be most fun, the part that you're looking forward to the most. Um,
That's a good place to start. Um, so um, so on the announcement, let me switch over here to the other on the announcement. We had this guy. This is a horn lizard from Mexico that I felt the need to illustrate right after a trip from Mexico. Sometimes you just get that inspiration to put something on paper that you just saw in the field, and this was one of those things. So this was done in pen and ink after laying down the initial drawing in pencil, and see if I can. It doesn't look as it doesn't look as high res as I thought it was going to, but
oh no, no, we're actually we're getting good detail on this
okay.
here. Um,
Okay. So I thought I would just kind of kick off showing this, and then um, maybe somebody out there is thinking, okay, but how do you get there? So,
right.
um,
And also I also love just maybe put it back there for a second.
oh,
Folks,
sure.
notice the way that those spikes on the sides, or the angle that he's got it is a tricky one because some of these spikes are pointing towards you, and on a foreshortened spike, it can be a visually confusing thing. But look at how this is handled. You've got the other ones that from this angle are in profile. So your brain sort of sees the one on the other side and goes like, oh, I know what I'm looking at. Because you've got the ones, yeah, that are close, the ones that are pointing at you, and the ones that are on the side there. So this angle is a really great way to handle that.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. That's a good lead in for scales. So, um, lizards lizards are a really diverse group. There's, over 5,000 species. Um, I think I underestimated that number. I was going to check that number before this. I forgot.
What
There's
we'll do is
thousands of species.
you mean worldwide?
Worldwide, there are thousands of species of
Okay.
lizards.
What we'll do is
We'll go
we'll
with
have somebody
thousands.
check, do an online check for us while this is going on, and they'll report back to us.
Okay, yeah, you can find the answer really fast at TIGR reptile database. And I totally blew it with that number. That's 5,000 is not the number.
We'll
We
find
would,
out soon. Somebody will go hunt that for us.
cool. And so there are many lineages of lizards all over the world that um, have radiated out into all sorts of different shapes and forms, and um, leglessness has evolved. Um, yeah, 7,000 looks closer. Um, Leglessness has evolved many different times in these different lineages, sort of independent from within other groups or clades, as we call them. Um, and and with those different groups, you get a whole myriad of different scale types and different scale shapes. And so for the this was a kind of simplistic line drawing that I did for the California Field Guide. And this just kind of shows, for the most part, there's some things missing. Gila monster isn't really covered here. But for the most part, this is kind of the four different general types of scales that are covering a lizard's body, among the lizards that you would find in California anyway. So we've got, if you've ever seen a blue belly, the western fence lizard that a lot of us are really familiar with because they're kind of everywhere. Um, their bodies are covered with these overlapping pointed keeled scales. So these pointed or mucronate scales overlap, um, and then they will have a keel running down the center of the scale. And this is pretty pretty blown up picture of our little fence lizard friends. We have skinks that we talked about a little bit ago have these very smooth um, cycloid scales that they're so smooth that they actually aid in the lizard getting out of your grip. Uh, you you can actually feel the lizard if you catch one. You can actually feel it sliding through your hand, um, making its getaway. And then if it slides all the way down to the tail will just drop off. So you got to be really careful with those tails. This is an example of these very fine granular scales that um, cover the epidermis of things like geckos. And so most geckos are covered in these tiny little scales. And then I guess two of our geckos uh, have these enlarged tubercles that sort of pop up interspaced within all these other flatter granular scales. And then and whiptails are another example of granular scales, which then if on the back, and then if you turn a whiptail over or a night lizard, this was actually based on a one of our night lizards in the genus Xanthusia, some of my favorite lizards. Both night lizards and whiptails, when you turn them over, they have these square, sort of plate-like um, rectangular scales. Uh, Tubercle, we had a question about tubercles. Um, I think the spelling was almost there. Let me Tubercle, I believe.
Are those sort of square rectangular ones? Is that sort of what I'm seeing on, say, a on the belly of a alligator lizard?
Yeah, that could be an example. And they're a bit more uniform than this, but
Okay.
and they're I believe at least on the dorsal surface, those square scales are reinforced with bone, so I think they're technically an osteoderm. I'm not sure about the belly, but yeah, they on an alligator lizard, and I was hoping to maybe do a little walkthrough drawing an alligator lizard in a bit.
That would be fun.
They're kind of covered with those square scales all the way around, but they have that breakup right along the side, um, where they have a space that allows them to breathe in confined areas. That's within that space. There's actually these granular scales, and we can uh, I'll I'll try to sort of convey that a little better with a drawing. Um, I was gonna say, so this is sort of general scalation that might cover most of the body, and that can change when you get to the tail, or it might not. But usually it changes when you get to the head. But before we get to the head, I just wanted to show this is more Mexican lizards, and then I promise we'll focus on California. Um, but I wanted to kind of show the importance of scales on some species, and then in other species, you might be able to get away with sort of um, just doing some generalized scale forms or hinting at scales. With the fence lizards, like our blue bellies, um, I feel that it's kind of necessary to really dive in and do the scales. And so when I think of that, I go immediately to the different fence lizards and spiny lizards that live in Mexico, because when you cross the border and get into Mexico, they just explode with size variation, scale variation, and they're just about every color of the rainbow. There are ones that are just solid blue. Are ones that are emerald green, and those emerald green ones. Some of them they will get like a golden orange head during breeding season, and it just goes on and on. But um, I do see from time to time that somebody may see a lizard in the field and it has a collar that extends around the neck like this. And we actually have two species of spiny or fence lizards in the U.S. Um, that have these collars. And but you have to go to Arizona or New Mexico or Texas to see them. Um, but a lot of times people mistake this for a collared lizard, Crotophytus,
Mm.
um, because they see a collar, and so it's a collared lizard
They
because it's a
see a
lizard with a
lizard
collar.
with a collar, and they say colored lizard.
And so scales can really help narrow down what you're looking for or looking at in the field, because a collared lizard would actually be covered. All this would be covered with those fine granular scales that we were looking at before, not these overlapping larger keeled scales. Um, but these spiny lizards here are all relatively closely related. That's great, yeah. So a collared lizard actually has those two collars, and then they're actually pretty smooth. Those scales are so fine that they're not really even showing up here. And if you hold a collared lizard, they're pretty smooth. Um, they feel almost velvety until they bite you, and then you get a whole nother feeling. Um, but I thought I would sort of trace over some of these scales. I didn't know how well this was going to show up. Um, but this also, to get to drawing lizards, I tried to sketch these all out sort of in relative size to one another so that you could really see between these three species. We've got the ornate spiny lizard here. This is a species from northern Mexico, And the minor lizard, this one comes in all sorts of different color flavors, including solid blue. This is a central Mexican lizard. And then McDougall's spiny lizard is a really cool thing that's endemic to Oaxaca. And it's actually kind of a polka dotted fence lizard, which is you don't see spots on spiny lizards very much, but these guys have these bright white spots on them, and they also have these really large scales. And so what I did was I kind of went in and sketched out my guidelines, and if I were going to say that this was going to be my drawing of these fence lizards, I would then go in and individually start kind of rounding out these crosshatch points into scales for this species. The scales are rather rounded for the ornate spiny lizard, and then they have these little keels on them. And so for this species, I would just um, you know really tiny um, really tiny scales on the back of this critter. And so that would be, another hour of work just doing that. And then in the minor lizard, kind of do the same thing, but you don't have as many. So maybe you get done in 45 minutes. And their scales being a little larger, their scales are also a little bit more um, pointed, and then they also have that little keel.
Something that gives me trouble on drawing this is I'm okay in the middle of it, but then as we kind of get to the edges of the lizard where they're starting to be, the scales are kind of foreshortened around the sides. What are your thoughts about how to handle the foreshortening of scales as you are you get down there towards the sides?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know about you, but I get a little cross-eyed. Um and I think what I actually end up doing is a whole lot of erasing. So
Mm.
um and these lizards here, these specific Scaloporus is the genus, uh are all crevice dwellers, and so their bodies are trying to do. I'm very new to this camera thing, folks. Let me that isn't working. Let me
This is working well. We're seeing what you're doing very, very, very well.
okay. I was trying to their bodies are dorsoventrally compressed so that they can get into crevices and cracks in the rocks and things. Um and so they are a little bit flatter than other lizards that you might be drawing. So you might not have to do as much of the
Mm.
um, uh, wrapping around. Um, but there is sort of a flow. And if I really wanted to nerd out here, I could make all these lines at the edge here um, connect up with these points of um, these other scales along the sides as they start to go to the side of the lizard. um, but yeah, to answer your question, Jack, I think really sometimes I'm even doing this. I'm kind of with a circle. I'm kind of trying to convey to my brain that up here along we're looking
Yeah.
straight down onto the lizard, you might have a circle, and then as you come towards the sides, you get an oval, and then over here your oval just flattens to,
Yeah.
a flat
Uh,
ellipse. And so I don't know if that helps.
no, it does. It does. It does.
I I will, then I'll go and get my pen and then turn those circles back into squares and diamonds.
Got it.
But yeah, I mean, it's um, I I I wanted to try and sell that lizards are fun and they're these really great. These lizards are my gateway drug to like all of biodiversity. When I was 6 years old, I fell in love with geckos and it just snowballed from there. But drawing lizards is hard and it's time consuming. So um, uh, the the other thing that I kind of wanted to go over was head shapes and tail shapes. And so um, this is just sort of a compilation of some of the variation in head morphology that we can see in California. Um, and it's really, I didn't know how far to go on this prior to um, doing this talk here with you today, but I was hoping to kind of convey getting your proportions correct before you start diving in with the scales. And um, so, and then, and then also like it's very it's hard for me as a herpetologist to to be trying to render a reptile and not be thinking like a herpetologist because um, to really convey accurately these plate-like scales on the head of this whiptail, you need if you're looking at it from this side perspective like this, you you do need to kind of have an understanding of what is going on the top, um, and what how these scales are coming together and meeting each other. And see if I can squeeze these both. This is a line drawing from from the California Field Guide, and it's actually showing a few different characteristics here between these two species. These are our two native whiptails in California, and then our field guide actually has two introduced species. So whiptails are famous for being parthenogenetic, um, being all female, which is it's like a whole science with whiptails kind of being the poster child for parthenogenesis, where they have no males, and there are a number of these hybrid species that have come out of bisexual whiptail species coming together and interbreeding and led to a number of different all female whiptails. And two of those are now established in California because if you're all female and the way you reproduce is by cloning, then all you need to do is let one of those whiptails go. And then if they like where they've landed, they can start their own population. And so this is actually happening all over the West. There's introduced whiptail species, all female, that have now been introduced to Washington, Oregon, New Mexico, um, Utah, and Arizona, which some of those states have some of their own um, all female species as well. Um, But anyway, I digress. These are our two native whiptails. This is our western whiptail that we have across a lot of California. Um, if you're in the Bay Area, you might know the western whiptail if you've been hiking at Mount Diablo or um, uh, Henrico State Park. And then this is the orange-throated whiptail, which is a Southern California critter. And so I've kind of labeled these really um, for your own notes if you'd like to familiarize yourself with the scales and what to call them. But I'm gonna do what Jack does, and I'm gonna grab a pen and hope that it's still working. And so for whiptails, they're notorious for being parthenogenetic, but they're also notoriously difficult to identify in the field. A lot of them are just covered in stripes, or a lot of them are checkered. Um, and without getting them in hand, it can be really difficult, challenging to key in on exactly which one you're looking at, especially when you're in places like Southern Arizona or um, New Mexico or parts of Texas, where you have three or four or five whiptails that are living all around you. So if you do get a whiptail in hand, or if you are studying preserved specimens at a local museum, some of the ways that you can um, start narrowing down, um, if you don't have a whiptail dichotomous key handy, is you can look at the superorbital semicircle here, which is this collection of scales that wrap around the supraoculars that cover the eye. And so that would be on our guy over here, that would be the supraoculars would be these scales kind of laying more flat here, which are these here, covering the eye. And then I didn't really draw in the supraorbital semicircle because it gets a little hairy trying to fit that in there. Um, and then another thing, another this is another diagnostic trait between the orange-throated whiptail here and the western whiptail here is the frontoparietal scale, which would be kind of right here on our other whiptail. Um, I'm sorry, I meant to color this in as I was going. Um, the frontoparietal is fused in the orange-throated whiptail, and the other three whiptails that we find in California, it's divided. And one of those whiptails that has been introduced, which is spreading like wildfire in Orange County, looks really similar to an orange-throated whiptail that also lives in Orange County. But if you get it in hand, um, I'm sorry, the young look really similar, um, although there's a difference in tail color. But if you get them in hand, just keying in on this section of the head can tell you if you're looking at the native or the introduced.
Mm.
And again, this is the Western whiptail here, which also has the divided frontoparietal. Um, and I'll try to color that green line here on our other whiptail here. Here it would sort of be hidden behind this collection of scales here. And I just wanted to try and help match up some of these other scales. So we've got, if you're looking at this whiptail here and this one here, this here right around the nostril or the nasal, these are the inner nasal scales. And so that would be these over here. And then up on top, got another scale that I don't have this scale labeled because people don't tend to label this one because it isn't really useful in identifying your whiptails. They all sort of seem to have it, and labeling it just kind of gives you another clutter of names to search through.
We
Uh,
can call it Steve.
yeah. So we've got Steve here.
Um, so this
Steve
is
scale.
yeah, when we're looking um at birds, we found it so helpful to just kind of do the homework and learn some of the feather tracks and feather anatomy. And I see that the same thing is true here. That
It-
having kind of and also kind of this makes me think about knowing where to look uh,
right, right,
is a big deal.
right. Um, yeah, and it also I've found that it can also, as you're drawing a lizard, not only identifying a thing, but when you're drawing it, it can kind of help you um, as you're going, trying to fit these scales in. You can kind of, measure however you're measuring. Maybe you're looking at the end of your pencil with, um, but how they all fit together can kind of help you with the getting your proportions more accurate. Um, because you've got these large scales here that they all need to fit in right here
Hmm. Hmm.
between, the center of the top of the head and after the nasal or the internasal scales. Um, and so getting just those guys fit in correctly. Here's the frontal scale. And then I'll go with yellow for these prefrontals. Um, and I can do that really quick down here too, if this is helpful to
Yeah.
you're looking at it right below the thing. And here I had this line going right through, and that's helpful to split up the scales that are actually split, like like these two yellow ones. Um, but the rest of the line was just to sort of help me keep things sort of equal. Um,
Uh, This is something that's kind of interesting to me as I just kind of looked at on my field guide sort of how I drew this guy. I was suggesting that there's some big scales up there, but I didn't have the understanding of what I was seeing to be specific about what I was doing. And so this kind of reminds me now of kind of illustrations that I've seen of birds by people who don't understand the wing anatomy. This is an
ah,
illustration of a whiptail head by somebody who doesn't understand whiptail structure and anatomy.
ah,
But then I just put in a long tail.
yes,
But it's really neat to sort of see when you really understand the structure of what is there, your ability to render that um, goes way up.
right. And and then from there, you get into the labial scales, and you just sometimes you really just kind of have to rework this to make them all fit correctly. Um, but if you don't have access to museum specimens, there are so many reference photos available online, and drawing lizards from life is just so, whether it's a photo or you're out in the field and you're nature journaling, um, it's it's an entirely different experience. Lizards, when they're pickled, most of our lizards have eyelids, and the eyelids are usually shut, and they've been pickled for a long time, in their voucher jars at museums, and their morphology, their body shape, and their head is just sort of lost the natural look and overall shape over time, and the eyes are shut, and um, a lot of times they've got a big slice down their side too, because a lot of diet studies have been done over the years, and other scientists have gone in there and pulled out whatever the critter had been eating, so they could publish on the on the diet of that species. Um, but moving across this page, I had some other sketches of desert iguana, just to show kind of a different look with a crest. The males get it's a subtle crest if you're familiar with other iguanas, but they do get a little iguana crest here, and a very blunt nose here. Um, and then these labial scales along the mouth are um, they kind of look like teeth when it's just drawn like this. The mouth is shut here, and the labial scales run along both the top and the bottom of the mouth, just as they do up here in the whiptail. But you can see the size difference in those scales between these two lizards, which are actually very distantly related um, lizard species. This whiptail here is actually more closely related to snakes than it is related to this desert iguana.
Oh, wow.
And then if you went in and started drawing the next row of scales on this desert iguana, then they start to not look like teeth so much. And you can start to kind of convey that the head is covered in these scales. Um, so we talked about night lizard. Did anyone have any questions on that?
Well, I just want to get kind of
I kind of blew
clarification.
over the desert iguana.
No, no, no. So what you're doing is you're picking out, here are a few large scales, and then if you just put those in by themselves with nothing else to reference there, it ends up looking like teeth. So you're then putting in on those large ones, you may be counting them and placing them deliberately. But when you get to the small ones, you're kind of coming up with a shorthand for suggesting scale texture in those areas between. Am I kind of getting that idea?
Yeah, 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 and you might even I think that's right, because um you could uh do this all day. And I did want to make another point that um when you're doing this and you know that you're going to be getting into the weeds with scales, or if that's where you want to go with it, it's really best to work large, so that when you get down to this, you're not like getting so far in there that that your pencil is smudging um, and you're sort of losing what you're trying to put down on paper. Um, and with these pen and ink drawings, this is on a 9 by 12 sheet of sketch pad paper, and the horn lizard itself is about 9.5 inches long um, on my piece of paper. And so when I was doing these tiny little facial scales here, it does with your pencil, depending on what pencil you're using, sometimes I have to drop the 2B because it's too soft, and you might go to something like, instead of your 2B, go to your 6H, which does a very different line. So if you're not familiar with pencil graphite, here's your 2B that's can really smudge. And then if you want to do finer lines that are lighter, that are a lot harder graphite, that don't smudge as readily, you can pick something up like a 6H, and then get in there with your scales. And then not really sure. I don't have a reference photo up right now, but I'm not really sure what happens over here on Mr. Desert Iggy. But when you go in later, if you want this to be a pen and ink drawing, I use these really fine tip pens, like this lip pen. Uh, it's a .03, so it's even finer than a .05 that you might find with the Micron. These guys, that's actually an 8. But when you go in and put in these scales with your ink, and then you go back later and let the ink dry, and go back later and then erase that pencil, then it's really fun to see just the ink laid down.
Mhm.
And that all the details that you put in over the pencil, like these lines here on these larger chin scales, those were probably just straight pencil lines when I did them, but I went over them in ink and dotted them for the texture. And then when I erased the pencil, you've got that texture there,
uh,
and it's fun to see that at the end of the whole thing.
and let's bring that big guy up again
Yeah,
one more time. Just sort of like if you're thinking about this as there's two ways to look at this, and one is, oh my gosh, there's so much complexity. What a nightmare. I don't want to draw it. The other is, oh my gosh, it would be just so fun to kind of geek out in that little area. And if you look at this, I kind of get the sense, like, as I'm looking at some of those big scales with the little wrapping like a barnacle of smaller scales around them, that you're having fun,
right.
that you're just sort of you're in a happy place. It looks like, you're in that part of a drawing. You're just letting yourself kind of draw at the speed of observation, and like, let's see what happens here. Let's see what happens here. If you're kind of giving yourself time pressure, I got to get this done. I got to get this done. And so many scales, then it is not fun. And that really kind of comes across in how we make our marks. But I get the sense here from looking at this that you kind of got in the zone.
Yeah, and that's a great point. If you are a person who really likes to sit down for a couple of hours and just get lost in your illustration, this is a great way to go get lost. Like, just um, starting to get down into here, where I was stippling in between these larger scales. I was stippling with a really fine pen here, and then it looks like I adjusted. I did this probably 15 years ago. going off memory, adjusted to a little bit higher gradient pen tip. And then in here, um, this is really dark pigment on this horn lizard um, in life. And so you could bump up to a much thicker pin tip or pin nib and go to town on putting in all this black. Um, and it's so while I'm doing it, I'm also thinking about like, oh man, that's gonna look so cool when I erase all the pencil. Because while you have that pencil there, it's still showing through and it starts getting kind of messy. But you've just got to have faith that you're just gonna have ink in the end. Um, I'm looking at our time here, so I
But
uh,
don't feel that you have to rush.
okay,
Go at the speed of kind of how you think and what you think is useful. And, if we want to, we can do another session another time. Um,
yeah, yeah,
because this is I'm it's really fun for me to kind of get inside your brain here. So if that sounds like fun for you, we can do that. But don't feel like you now have to go like bam, 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 bam. Just say I just saw it in the chat, little comment. Yes, please, another session. Um, we
okay,
we like seeing the way that you think, and also just kind of getting in there on the skids on the head of that whiptail. Um, it helps us see the level of nuance and detail that's in there. And this reminds us of why biodiversity matters.
yes, absolutely. Um, yeah, I mean that's really what it's all about for me is just like oh biodiversity. California is just a it's just a mecca for whether you're into plants or birds or lizards. California's got it. Um, I going into to biodiversity and just how fun lizards can get. Here we're looking at a night lizard again. So this is the head of one of six species of night lizard in California. So this is a granite night lizard, and it just happens to be another crevice dweller. Um, this is a Southern California critter, and at first look, if you're familiar with geckos, it really kind of strikes you as a gecko with this big round eye that doesn't appear to have eyelids, and this vertical elliptical pupil here.
Hmm.
Um, and right off the bat, one thing that can tell you that this is not a gecko is it has these plate-like enlarged head scales, much like a whiptail. And in fact, these guys are actually most closely related to our skinks. Um, but they have adapted to a way of life of living in the rocks, and so they have this kind of flattened head. But all the night lizards have these head scales, and there's actually a publication um, a few years ago that was just a paper, a peer-reviewed paper on night lizard head scalation and what we're going to call all these things, all these different scales. I won't go into that here, but I sort of wanted to show um, an actual gecko. So this is our native leaf-toed gecko, and um, we were looking at its foot on the leaf-toed gecko plate a while back in the California Field Guide. I keep saying California Field Guide rather than just the Field Guide because we are currently working on a new up-to-date Western Field Guide for all the amphibians and reptiles of the Western U.S. and Canada. So
Yeah, this first project wasn't enough.
yeah,
You need
yeah,
to
we
need to
decided to
draw a few more amphibian larvae.
yeah. Oh man, so many more to go. Yeah, we're gluttons for punishment. Um, so, but what you would find with our little leaf-toed gecko here is that its head is covered in those little granular scales. And then as you get closer to the neck, they pick up those enlarged tubercles. Um, but a lot of people don't go to that level of detail when they're illustrating a gecko. There's enough pattern on most geckos where the pattern can kind of just obscure or take up the room of where the scales would be. Um, if I were to if I were to color this little guy in, I might I would probably do this with paint, but I've got these pins handy here for this. Um, if I wanted to sort of convey those, see if this works here, those little granular scales, you could maybe do that with just dotting them in with a pen. Um, but really, I just kind of wanted to show the similarity in a body structure of a couple of little lizards that live in the rocks. They live in crevices and under cap rocks and in outcrops and things in Southern California. But they're really not very closely related. And then our other geckos, if you're familiar with um, banded geckos, we have two native banded geckos in California, and they are representatives of a different family of geckos. There are actually seven different families of geckos. They've all been split up over the years into their own families. And this is the Eublephaриdae, probably my favorite family of geckos. And they are called the eyelid geckos because these are the most primitive geckos, and they have uh, eyelids that can actually open and shut. And the structure of these minute little scales that surround the eye um, they're just really, for me, it's kind of fascinating to look at up close. And then you can really get into the details of the eyes. Gecko eyes are really intricate, and they can be fun to really get into drawing the complex different. There's a lot of species are they have a lot of heavy venation that enter the eye, um, that can be really fun
Ooh,
to just sort of sit there and
yeah.
get into that. And if you are a leopard gecko owner, that's this family. That's if this is looking like a leopard gecko to you, then you are spot on. That's a cousin of the leopard gecko. Um, and then, of course, we have horned lizards in California. We have four species, and you can't really go through variation and diversity of head morphology without covering the horny toad. Um, so we've already sort of looked at the other horned lizard, but really complex uh, scalation and just skull morphology. I mean, these are actually bone. These horn structures that are for protection are actually, that's the skull. Which is not always the case with lizards like, iguanas that, if this was a green iguana that had the big crest that comes off the thing, that's not bone. That's just, those are, scales. Um, if you were to look at the skeleton, that wouldn't be there. And then we do have Gila monsters in California, and uh, I thought I'd throw one in because for a couple of reasons. One, you can see how small the eye is on these things. Gila monsters are really fossorial. They're meaning they live most of their lives underground. They are above ground for maybe 5% of the time that they're alive. So they really only come out to feed and to find a mate, and the rest of the time they're down where you can't find them. Um, but really, really unique. Um, uh, I'm reading a comment here. Um, Really unique head morphology on these things. They have these big, broad heads that are covered in these round osteoderms. So all these scales that cover, if you're not familiar with a Gila monster head, take a minute and just Google what these guys look like. Um, all these rounded scales that cover the head are osteoderms, which means that they're reinforced with bone, just like all the scutes that you would see on the back of a crocodile or an alligator. um, and then they have this jaw that bows out right here down along this side before it kind of curves back in towards the neck. And that is because this is where the venom gland is inside the lower jaw on the Gila monster. So they are
Ooh.
venomous, um, and that's where they hold their toxic venom.
So it's not back by the cheek there. It's sort of down in that lower jaw there.
Right.
Ooh.
Yeah, and so you never want to get bit by one of these guys. Don't mess with Gila monsters in the field. The pain is described as if you were bit on the hand, uh, your hand being dipped in fire while being pounded on by a sledgehammer. So they have these little needle-like teeth inside here in the mouth that they will grip onto you like a pit bull, and then they chew the venom in
And these guys don't
from that
they don't like
gland.
to let go, do they?
They don't like to let go. Oh, I had some other pens. Here they are. Yeah, they will. That venom pumps in through the teeth into your system, and it's no fun. Um, and then where did that go? Here it is. I'll move on to feet.
Oh,
Um,
see, this is such a challenge for me.
well, I hopefully I can um, help with that.
Yeah.
Thinking about colors here, I was going to do another kind of color diagram here. So I forgot to label this. I'll label it as I go along. But this is our whiptail friend here, and whiptails have these really long, thin toes, especially the um, the fourth toe. So typically, we're numbering toes one, two, three, four, five. And with whiptails, they have these enlarged scales that cover just this part of the foot, and then these kind of get back to those smaller granular scales along here. But what you can notice about a whiptail, and this is these 2 feet here um, are good representatives for the majority of our lizards in California. This would be kind of the lizard foot that you would see on a fence lizard, our bluebelly, um, horn lizards. Um, Maybe if you're in Southern California, you're familiar with the side blotch lizard. Um, so that one toe that just kind of comes out longer than the other ones. You'll notice that in the uh, in the whiptail, it's the third toe. No, that doesn't work very well. Third toe and the fifth toe that are more or less the same length. These two little guys here are kind of tucked back in there, and then we have this long one that's just about double in length what these other
Mhm.
two are, third and fifth. Um, and to let's see, I'll
Is the number of joints in these different?
that's a good question. I believe they are. I was working from actual photos to draw these, and so these went in just as I saw them, and I'm pretty sure that they do differ between these different families. That's a good question, and I
Like
I've actually never looked into that.
with the bird foot, the one in the back has one long bone and then the claw. And then as you go in to out, the next one has two and then a claw, then three and then a claw, and then on the outer one, four and a claw.
And
Um,
that's across all birds or
yeah.
passerines
Yeah, yeah,
or
well, yeah. It's across all birds unless there's been major modification of the feet. Like some birds have lost one of the one of the toes, but in ones with
right,
they've like if you got an ostrich, there's two toes.
right.
Um, but in the rest of them, yeah, there's this one, two, three, four in
Okay.
the number of joints, and I wonder if because of sort of similar ancestry, if we've got sort of what might be going on with these guys with the bones in there.
Yeah, that's a good question. And then of course in some of them it really really stands out. And then in other ones over here, you just don't see them. Um, and so just to sort of sketch one of these out, just to see how I kind of go through the process. That's probably
This
not
is
going
what
to
I
be
want.
enough room. Um, I had some spare paper. Here we go. um, so I'll start with kind of an oval shape for the main part of the foot here, coming off of the leg, and then so for that whiptail, I I know that the thing is the toe is kind of coming out almost perpendicular to the foot. So along that plane, I'll kind of swoop in the toe there, and I'm also kind of giving myself enough room to put in those other ones. I know this one's going to kind of come off of that part of the foot there. And then when you get down to this area, it's going to kind of come off in a different angle, in a different direction. And then way back here, this is another thing that's uh, can tell you a lot about a lizard or what species or what family you're looking at. This gap right here can be really wide between these two toes, or it can be um, a lot closer.
Yeah. Oh, weird.
Um, and so we've got, our
And in this,
French toad.
we're looking at back feet here across.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, yeah. I meant to, that's a key point. Yeah, we are looking at the back left foot, the hind foot, the left side of the lizard. So this lizard here, this would be the knee up here, and then it would, oops, sorry, and then it would angle back this way for the femur. And so the lizard is looking that way. Thanks for jumping in on that. I totally forgot to talk about this is all secondhand knowledge to me, so I just sort of start talking. Um, Here's our fringe-toed lizard. If you're not familiar with fringe-toed lizards, they're phrynosomatids in Southern California that are strictly adapted to fine wind-blown sand dunes.
Hmm.
Um, and so they have these fringe scales, these enlarged scales that come off of, mainly they come off of these two, the third and the fourth toes. Um, and those enlarged scales act like snowshoes for them as they run across the fine sand so that they don't sink into the sand so they can actually escape a predator and keep moving. So they have increased surface area um, along their toes so they can push off. And they also have, I've noticed with fringe toe lizards, they have this really unique um, toenail or claw morphology that their their toenails, their claws come, they just kind of come straight off of their toe there. Like with the whiptail, it really does kind of have this slight curve to it. Um, and then you'll see with these other guys here, this is our granite night lizard again. So this was fringe-toed lizard. This is our granite night lizard that we looked at the head on the previous piece of paper. And this is pretty cool. I actually noticed this when I was doing this sketch that uh, in Xanthusiids, at least these crevice dwellers, it's the fourth and the fifth toe that are of similar length,
Oh.
and they have these little claws that are good for clinging to rock. Um, and then they also have this kind of bent toed look that you actually see a lot in certain gecko species that cling to limestone. There are a few groups of geckos in Southeast Asia that really, and Indonesia that really exemplify this as well.
So that bent part will be sticking up into the air.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, more or less. Like if I was to draw a shadow under this foot, it's kind of doing that.
That's weird.
Yeah. So here's like a shadow under this toe here.
Yeah.
Um, that's fun. Let's put them all in.
Yeah. Needs to have that, it kind of grounds it, doesn't it?
Yeah. And then this here is an alligator lizard, and on the alligator lizard, it's the third and the fourth toe that are more or less equal in length. And then these guys back here are pretty similar in length as well, the second and the fifth.
You see, this is just all sorts of levels of proportion that were not on my radar. This is cool to see. We don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And that like watch the length of these different toes. I was kind of the long toe number 4 was on my radar, and that little gap between 4 and 5.
Hmm.
And the looking at the proportions of these different toes and whether it sticks up or not, and or if the claw on the end is just going to be a continued sort of spike off the end of the toe or a little hook. Um, it's so interesting to see and sort of made aware of these details. That's really fun. So, just kind of giving you a heads up. In about 5 minutes, in 5 minutes we're going to be doing kind of wrapping up this portion of this talk. Um, And so again, don't feel that you're supposed to like now do a speed session of everything else. But just wanted to make you kind of aware of that timing. And if you feel like kind of coming back and playing with us again, we would love to have you. This is such this level of geekdom. Like, let's look at lizard feet. Who thought that today you would be, spending this time kind of digging deep into lizard feet? That's really, really fun.
Yeah, I hope everyone's having as much fun as I am because yeah, who would have thought I would be ever doing a drawing lesson with Jack Laws talking this much about lizard heads and feet.
It's like this is like for this community, like this is spot on. We love to kind of like let's do a deep dive. Um, you know, you are somebody who's now probably thought more about um uh, the morphology of larval amphibians than probably anybody on the planet right now. Um, and so there are these it's really neat to see sort of areas that richly, um, and then can kind of help shine a spotlight on, like, you might want to look over here. Like, pay attention, like how far is the bird's eye from the beak? Um, and looking at this lizard, like this one looks really gecko-ish. Like, what's going on here with that? This is really, really, really fun. And again, it just reminds me of how rich the biodiversity of this planet is, and why we all ought to work together to protect and preserve it. This is important. This is really cool.
I agree. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Um, the I'm amazed at the short period of time that you finished this book in. You said that you did this in 3 years.
Yeah.
That's commitment to your craft there.
Yeah. I mean, I have to thank my wife who you've met for, you know, letting me do it in the first place. But yeah, we couldn't have done it without that kind of support. But the other, Robert Hansen, Bob has, I think, thought about this for a long time, as I have. Bob is really organized and has all of the literature that you would ever need for doing a book like this on California. He's compiled a home library of everything and anything published on California herps over the last like 4 decades.
Hmm,
Um, and I have a lot, but he has everything.
that's amazing.
He has a database, so he can just kind of plug into whatever he needs. And so between the two of us, we just sort of tackled it. He really knows snakes and salamanders, and I really know the lizards and frogs, and together we kind of tackled the turtles. And
We gotta do turtles.
yeah, yeah. So um, yeah, we made it happen. I don't know how we did that in 3 years, but
That's really, really impressive. And by the way, folks, you don't do projects like this because you want to get rich. If you do something like this, it needs to be because you have an inner drive to make that book about reptiles and amphibians that you always wanted to have. Um, it's beautiful work. It's really fun to have a chance to pick your brain and see what you have been, how you think about these things, the kind of the level of detail that you notice. Um, and so we have we have time for perhaps one or two questions before we wrap today. Um, and if anybody in the community here has a question for Jackson, You can use the raise hand function on your computer, um, or you can turn on your camera and and do a dance, and we'll notice that. Um, the when do you expect the sort of the Western field guide to hatch?
Well, we put a deadline of I think it was March 2027 in our contract, which is sort of extrapolated from the California field guide, but we have such a broader area to cover that may
That's
be
ambitious.
ambitious,
Yeah,
um, but we'll see. Hopefully by 2028 or 2029.
that's wonderful. Um, and the want to also make people aware of the website California Herps, which is a useful place to kind of go get photographs of correctly identified species. You can see a digital version of some of our biodiversity. Um, and uh, the I also want to encourage people to, in your journals, let's really start to pay attention to a lot of people do birds, but let's open our curiosity and our attention to what would happen if we started to look more carefully at the reptiles and the amphibians that are around us and that there's something really beautiful there to learn if we start to pay attention on a deeper level. Um, Jackson, do you have any last thoughts for the community here?
Uh, just keep doing what you're doing. I've had a lot of fun. I hope that I helped in some way with your rendering of reptiles of the lizard kind. And yeah, just appreciate biodiversity and keep getting outside.
That's right. These and these these little beasties, they need defenders. That's us. And if we don't see them, if we don't appreciate them, we're not motivated to do that. The more that we can get ourselves to sort of start to pay attention to our little herply friends, the more that we're going to be um, also motivated to stand up and to protect them and their little eyelids.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Jackson, so grateful for you for being here. Also, thank you, Avea Moore, for logistics behind the scenes.
Thank
Uh,
you.
to all of you who joined us today, we hope that this was useful, and we may be seeing more from our friend Jackson. So good to spend time with you. Take care.
You as well. Happy to do it.
Bye bye, everyone.